Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of the GDM Show, the Global Dawah Movement Show. I'm here with Hamza Sources. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alhamdulillah, how are you today?
Alhamdulillah, I'm well. How are you, bro?
I'm good. So in this week's episode, what we're going to be talking about was the discovery by the Birmingham University of these old Quranic fragments. And they've done some carbon dating on these fragments, and they've dated it to about the 1st century after 1st Hijri, right? And there's been a lot of excitement online by Muslims, by Christians, by non-Muslims, and there's been a lot of commentary, and people are using this now as an argument to show, look, this is what we've told you, that the Quran has been preserved. But what we're going to be talking about in this show is that even if we found an earlier manuscript, it wouldn't make any difference to the preservation of the Quran. And Hamza is going to be talking about this.
So I hope so, yes.
You want to take it away, inshallah.
Thank you, bro. Excellent introduction. So, as you said, there's lots of commentary on this at the moment from Muslims, non-Muslims, academics, non-academics, popularizers, everybody. And some Muslims are using this as an evidence to show that the Quran is preserved. But I want to highlight something very clear here. Even if we found an earlier Quran, it would not make a difference.
Wow.
Even if we found a Quran before the death of the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, it would not make a difference. Let me add something into the mix. Even if we found a Quran with an extra 3 chapters and an extra 1,000 words at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, it would not make a difference.
Well, that's an extraordinary claim.
It is.
Why would you say this?
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Right.
So you want my evidence, right?
Yes, please.
Ask for it.
So please, Hamza, explain.
Yeah, no, I will, inshallah. God willing. So the reason it doesn't make a difference is because the way that the Muslim scholars and the Muslim community preserved the Quran was via something called mutawatir reporting or tawatur reporting. In the English language, this means recurrent oral transmission.
Okay.
Mass oral transmission.
Right.
Now, people may be thinking, hold on a second, oral transmission? What on earth is oral transmission? Somebody says something to somebody else, and that somebody else says something to somebody else, and that continues. Well, we know, we've played this at school, right?
Right.
You do that, and at the end of the chain, they've said something totally different.
Absolutely.
So, I want to highlight here that that's not the case.
Okay.
What mutawatir reporting or recurrent reporting, what this is essentially masses of people, a massive group of people, reporting something to another massive group of people.
Right.
And those people, for example, all go to different times and places, and they report the same thing to another massive group of people, and it continues.
Yes. Okay.
Now, because of the varying oral transmission, it's impossible to claim that they all conspired, right? Now, let's actually define a little bit more technically what mutawatir reporting is, or what recurrent reporting is.
Right.
Now, I've got some notes here. A recurrent report, a mutawatir report, is one which is reported by such a large number of people that they cannot be expected to agree upon a lie, all of them together, right? Al-Ghazali, the 11th century theologian, he spoke about this, he wrote about this, and he said, mutawatir reporting, a recurrent report, is that it has lots of people in the beginning of the report, of the oral transmission, lots of people in the middle, and lots of people at the end, okay? And obviously, in the Islamic scholarship, there's been a difference of opinion on what constitutes concerning the number of people in that report to make it a mutawatir report, to make it a valid recurrent report. Some argue it's 4 people, some argue 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but the numbers are irrelevant. What we have to focus on is the rational principle here. And this is the rational principle. That the rational principle is that the possibility of coincidence or organized falsehood is 0, basically. That's what it is.
Right.
So if by looking at this mass group of people reporting to another mass group of people at different times and places with all different varying oral transmissions, if that constitutes rationally that they couldn't have conspired on a lie or an organized falsehood, then that's a recurrent report.
Wow.
Now, some may argue, hold on a second, Hamza and Salahuddin. you guys are just crazy Muslims who are making stuff up. You're taking it from thin air and saying, here, we have a new philosophical principle called mutawatir. Yeah? No, that's not the case, because this has also been spoken about and written about in the Western tradition.
Okay.
David Hume, would you believe it?
Oh, wow.
He basically wrote in his inquiry concerning human understanding about this particular issue, and he referred it to miracles.
Right.
I'm going to say what he wrote, and I'm going to explain what he meant, which is very interesting. He said, "For I own that otherwise there may possibly be miracles or violations of the usual course of nature, of such a kind as to admit of proof from human testimony, though perhaps it will be impossible to find any such in all the records of history. Thus, suppose all authors in all languages agree that from the 1st of January 1600 there was a total darkness over the whole earth for 8 days. Suppose that the tradition of this extraordinary event is still strong and lively among the people, that all travelers who return from foreign countries bring us accounts of the same tradition without the least variation or contradiction. It is evident that our present philosophers, instead of doubting the fact, ought to receive it as certain." He's giving us the rational basis for recurrent reporting. You have a mass group of people reporting exactly the same thing based upon testimony from a previous mass group of people that never met each other, but yet they're reporting exactly the same thing.
Wow. Yes.
So to say that there wasn't 8 days of darkness is like tantamount to a massive conspiracy.
Yes, I see.
And that's the point. And I wrote about this in 2008 when I responded to the Channel 4 documentary on the Luling and Luxembourg hypothesis on the preservation of the Quran.
Right.
And I think the paragraph here is quite apt that summarizes what we're saying.
Okay.
If millions of people who have memorized the Quran can trace the oral memorization of the Quran down the centuries of teachers and scholars all the way back to the Prophet himself, upon whom be peace, who could doubt the authenticity of this oral tradition? Especially if these millions of people who memorize the Quran, also known as Hufaz, live in different places in the world and have learnt the Quran via different teachers and scholars. The amount of varying oral transmissions and the amount of people who have learnt the Quran, in addition to there being no discrepancy what they have memorized, is not a historical accident. The conclusion can only be that the Quran memorized today is the one that was taught 1400 years ago.
Wow.
This is something that Angelica Nevrith, the German scholar, I believe, and I might be wrong, it's in the book called The Cambridge Companion to the Quran. She said the Quran we have today is the Quran of Muhammad, upon whom be peace.
Wow.
And because this principle is such a rational principle,
Yes.
it's impossible, if this oral tradition is true, this mutawatir reporting, this recurrent reporting is true, it's impossible to go against it. And we have live examples in North Africa, bro.
Really?
Many scholars do this, and many students do this. Go to North Africa, some villages and some places of worship, mosques, and you ask for a Quran. You may not even have a physical copy. And you want to recite, for example, Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter of the Quran, the cow. You're like, I want to recite my Quran. Where's my Quran? Ya walad. Hey boy, come here. A little boy comes along and he starts to write for you the whole chapter because he's memorized it.
Wow.
And these villagers and these people have memorized the Quran of Africa. Some of them have never read a book before. Some people can't even read. But they've learned it by an oral tradition.
Wow.
And these people don't have the same chain of narration. They don't have the same oral transmission. They learn it from different scholars with different varying oral transmissions, all leading back to the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom he peace himself. We have live examples of this recurrent reporting. And they all memorize this Quran. So if anyone has any money, and this is a challenge, pay for these African students to come to England, to go to America, go to Australia, to speak to fellow Muslims who have memorized the Quran, and you see there'll be no discrepancy.
Wow, that's
Isn't that amazing?
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Now, what I've done as well is I've done a diagram.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
so you may have to hold this, bro. I do apologize. And I'm not very good at diagrams. I do apologize. And I need to cover your face as well.
That's fine.
That's all right. I do
Let's go
apologize,
ahead.
bro. And let me just ask the cameraman if this is good. Is this good, cameraman? A little bit lower. Is that good? That's perfect. Good. So this is my diagram, right? So say this is the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace. It's represented by P here. And you have 4 companions. Obviously, in this case, when it comes to the memorization of the Quran, there were many, many more companions. But just for argument's sake, say 4. Let's take one companion. He traveled somewhere or stayed where he was, and at a particular time in his life, he taught some students. Say there's two. Obviously, they had many more students, but just for argument's sake, say two. And one particular student also became a teacher, and he taught his students all the same Quran. And one of his students, at maybe a different location at a different time, taught his students as well. And this chain continues into our present day. This is just one chain. Now another companion will have a different chain, and it may crisscross, but there'll be differences as well, and they both taught the Quran at different times and places. And this is for many companions, by the way. So as you can see, the different varying oral transmissions are so great that to claim that what we have today is not Quran is to claim a mass conspiracy. This is what David Hume was talking about in action. This is mutawatir reporting. This is the oral tradition en masse, mass reporting, and it's a rational principle from that perspective. And you know what? We even have presidents today. For example, China, bro. How do you know China exists? You've never been there?
No.
You just know China exists because everyone reports that China exists. Now, we've discussed this in previous shows.
Yes.
But basically, I know that China exists because I've met people who've said that they've gone to China. And the people who I've met, they haven't met each other either. So how can they conspire to claim there's something called China? Now you may argue about Google Maps and someone who looks Chinese and all that stuff, but yet that's still oral testimony. Because you have to believe that the guy who took a picture of the map or who drew the map, you have to believe his say-so that is a place called China. Do you see my point? And even someone who looks Chinese, maybe he's Korean, right? So we've discussed this previously in other shows concerning testimony, but many of the things that we believe to be true is based upon this mass oral tradition.
Yes.
For example, even the existence of the Eiffel Tower. Yes, I've seen pictures, but how do I know that's a picture in France?
Yes.
I still have to believe all of these millions of photographers and millions of people and millions of scholars and geographers and all these people and travelers who have said that there's a thing called Eiffel Tower and who have claimed that that picture is a picture of the thing that we're talking about in France, for example.
Yes.
So it's a well-known phenomenon. So even if you find a Quran that has 5 different chapters, another 1,000 words, wouldn't make a difference because we have this oral tradition, and if you study the preservation of the Quran, the oral reporting, mass reporting was always primary, and the textual proof was always secondary to support the oral tradition.
Jazakallah khairan. So please don't forget to like and share and subscribe. I just want to end on this note that in the fragments that they found in Birmingham, one of the verses was from chapter 18, verse 27, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there is none who can alter his words.
Well, this is like a sign in a way.
Yes.
The sign is that whether we have a text or not, it's irrelevant because none can alter his words because we have the oral mutawatir tradition.
Subhanallah. Jazakallah khairan. Please join us for next week's show on the Global Dawah Movement Show. Assalamu alaikum.